and Life in Blood for the next part of the ESPON seminar organized together with the presidency of the EU Council, Slovenian presidency. I'm very happy as the host of this specific workshop right now to greet everyone attending online and also attending from the studio. My name is Viktor Szydarowski. I'm director of ESPON EGTC, and the reason for me being here as a host is that this is not the first opportunity to present to you the futures, the territorial development futures of the macro regions, EU macro regions. The ESPON program already engaged with many stakeholders in the past to discuss the possible trajectories for the Baltic Sea region and the Alpine space. And now it's time to present to you results of the work together with a prominent group of researchers and policy stakeholders on the future for the Danube and the Adriatic Ionian macro regions with the census date as of 2050. So please feel comfortable. We'll be having very interesting discussion, and I would like to then pass the mic to our moderator, Franziska Sielker from the University of Cambridge, who is with us online. Franziska, please.
Many thanks, Victor, for introducing the session. I'm very happy that we get to actually be greeted from Bled in a very impressive setting. As you can all see, those hybrid events really make for something new for the future as well. So, but today we are looking at the Danube region and the Adriatic Ionian region. And as Victor already has said, ESPON has a tradition in trying to identify alternative futures, thinking really about how the territory is developing in a long-term perspective until 2050, for example. Now, after the Baltic Sea region and already the Alpine region, now ESPON has shifted the focus and also is taking up the two remaining macro regions, which is the Adriatic Ionian region and the Danube region. Now, the specificity of those ESPON projects is that they are following a co-creation process where the lead partner of the project, which is actually Spatial Foresight, with a number of other institutions from across the region, are aiming together with the stakeholders to identify what potential alternative scenarios could be. I was allowed to sit into some of those co-creation processes, and I can already tell you there's really exciting conversations going on that we will be looking in today. Now, I've got with me today Maria Toptsidou from Spatial Foresight, who will be introducing some of the interim results of the discussions. And then I've got today with me three policymakers who were involved in the process as well and who have identified and suggested this project to take place. So I'm very grateful for Mathilde Konstantopoulou. I practiced the name, and now that we are live, of course, it's challenging to say it. To have her with me, she's actually the EUSDR Deputy National Coordinator, and she's also the project coordinator for the facility point of the EUSDR region. She is at the Ministry of Development and Investment, and she has also a lot of experience with ESPON programs, and she has been very actively engaged in the process throughout the whole time. Then I'm very grateful to have with us Robert Lichtner from the Danube macro region, and actually he's the head of the Danube strategy point. So similarly as Mathilde, very actively engaged in the day-to-day practices of the macro region, but also consistently being involved in the long-term outlook and what do we actually want to achieve with this macro-regional cooperation. And then last, but of course not least, we've got Lenča Humerca Šolar with us from Slovenia today. She's the head of Strategic Spatial Division at the Ministry of Environment and Spatial Planning from Slovenia. And I'm very grateful that you are as well joining today. So I'm sorry that at times I'm a bit distracted because I'm still letting some people in at the same time. So we foresee for the session the following order of events. I will first address the panel, then we have a presentation by Maria, and then we've got some two rounds with the panel, but also at the same time already allow the audience, you out there on the different screens across Europe, to ask questions to the panel. So in medias res, the first question that I would like to address to the panel is, why did you decide to actually take up this idea and develop territorial scenarios for the Danube region and the Adriatic Ionian region? And maybe we can start with the hosting country of the ESPON seminar, Lenča. Would you be willing to take the floor first?
Thank you, and good afternoon to everybody online and here in studio. So I wanted to stress that since we are facing new challenges, we have to commonly think of solutions. And I think that many of these challenges are already taken on board within the Territorial Agenda 2030, which addresses the challenges in order to achieve territorial cohesion and, of course, ensure good quality of life. Most of these challenges go beyond borders, I mean administrative borders, and can therefore not be dealt with individually by member states, regions, or even local communities. I think that cooperation across places, people, and administration is nowadays a need, a must. And in this sense, I think that common activities within macro regions are very welcomed, so we can decide on common future goals, and we can encourage projects which might lead to better solutions. As already mentioned, a similar exercise has been carried out for the Alpine space. I am lucky that I was part of the team at that exercise as well, and I'm happy to say that the results will help to carry up the common goals and will also help to carry up national strategies and also implementation documents. So I warmly wish that the work started in this ESPON project will bring us good results and will help to create better places and achieve good quality for us all. This for the beginning. Thank you.
Many thanks. I would suggest that we now first travel the shorter distance by air at least, which would be in this case to Vienna.
Hello from Vienna. Thank you for the invitation. I'm terribly sorry not being able to be with you today. As you probably know, we are in a full lockdown, second week already. So traveling is a bit difficult at the moment. Nevertheless, I'm again very happy to be part of the project, and thanks for the invitation to today's discussion. And I can only compliment some small things that Lenča was referring to, because this is obviously something that we all refer to within this study. But I would like to turn to the maybe a bit of specifics of the Danube region. And as many of you know, the Danube Region strategy has been on implementation for 10 years. So this year we have been celebrating 10 years of implementation of the EUSDR. And last year, 2020, we have also revised the action plan of the strategy. Parallel to that, we have something like 3 parallel processes running, which also other strategies can refer to, the already famous embedding exercise that we have all been dealing with. In the Danube, we are also dealing with the question of the new monitoring of the implementation of the strategy, and there is also an evaluation of the strategy going on at the moment. So if you look at these 3 processes, all 3 of them are short to medium term processes that we kind of follow at the moment. And I think what's very important, and I think this is where the TEVI 2050 comes at the right moment in, is to win and to gain a long-term perspective. And this is exactly why it's important for the Danube region stakeholders to be part of this perspective, to see the geographical trends that may lead us in the future, and to win the baselines, alternative scenarios, and to look how we can adjust the priorities to see where more efforts will be necessary to make the region fit for 2050. So from all the challenges that we certainly share, no matter what macro-regional strategy, we see that most of them are of horizontal and cross-cutting nature. So this is something which makes us think out of the box, and not only to focus on one priority or one topic, but look a bit ahead and look right and left and see how we can jointly join forces and try to work here. So yes, this would be maybe my short initial statement, and back to you, Franziska.
Thank you very much. And now I suggest we travel a little bit more south. Mathilde.
Thank you, Franziska. Good afternoon to everybody. I'm really jealous of Lenča and Victor being there in Bled, but what can we do? That's life. And coronavirus has its own plans. Thank you very much to the ESPON program for this invitation, and I would also like to thank the Slovenian presidency for the invitation to this workshop. I would like to start with answering the question, why this study, and why at this point of time when we first asked the ESPON program to put forward this whole procedure. So there were 3 parameters taken into consideration within the EUSDR strategy when this study was requested. First, it was uncertainty, then it was timing, and then it was enlargement. So when we are speaking of uncertainty, EUSDR was at that point of completing the first programming period, being one of the youngest children within the macro-regional family. And also the implementation of the strategy was at a crucial point. So the questions popping up were a lot. Do we need a revision of the strategy? Do we need a revision of the action plan? What lies ahead in the new programming period for macro-regional strategies in general? What to keep? What to change? How do we move on? Are we successful with our strategy? What are our weak points and what are our strong points? Then it was timing. The timing was perfect. Pandemia was prevailing. The new programming period was starting. And so the new health conditions required a different mentality, not only when designing strategies, taking into consideration force majeure conditions and the extraordinary circumstances, but also when implementing, asking for flexibility, diversification, modification of the ways of planning, but also of the ways that projects are in progress and are completed, how they bear expenses and how they present their results. And finally, it was also the enlargement issue. EUSDR was born by 4 member states and 4 partner states in the wider Balkan area, getting together, willing to address the common challenges of a certain geographical area, eager to promote the strength of their territories, determined to fight the weaknesses, passionate to exploit their opportunities of their common sea and the neighboring hinterland. The addition of the Republic of North Macedonia in the picture, and soon upcoming the full membership of San Marino, has pinpointed the necessity of including the whole Western Balkans area in the picture and opening the path for other countries and areas to join the strategy. So all these facts diversified the needs and differentiated the scope of the strategy, expanding its mission, broadening its vision, and asking for territorial scenarios for its viable future. Thank you.
Many thanks. So these are actually multiple reasons of why we should look into the future. And I suggest that we right away have a look into the future. And Maria, thus I would like to hand over to you. And this will now be the time where we'll be working with slides. So for about 15 minutes, we now can enjoy actually sitting back and relax and think about the future while Maria discusses them with us.
Thank you very much, Franziska, and thank you everyone for following this workshop today. So hello from my side too. So what can be actually possible futures for the Danube and the Adriatic Ionian macro-regions by 2050? Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So to get there, actually, we need to think first a little bit of what we mean by future. If we move to the next slide, if there is one thing actually that characterizes the future, this will be uncertainty. That means that nobody knows what can really happen tomorrow, next week, or even a year later. And take the COVID pandemic as an example. It's just another example showcasing this uncertainty and showing how actually only one unexpected event can influence so many different aspects in people's lives and businesses all over the world. And especially today, in such an ever-changing world, this uncertainty increases even more. So what can we do actually about this then? Well, definitely predicting the future is a no-go, is anything but possible. So we forget about this. At the same time, there's not only one possible future. There can be multiple possible futures, and that's why futures comes here in plural on purpose, just to show that there can be very many different possibilities for the future and many different futures. What we can do, though, is preparing for this future. And this is where territorial foresight and territorial scenarios can help us, actually in preparing for this unexpected, in dealing with these uncertainties. And if we click one more, we can see that scenarios actually help us here and do not make predictions. They do not make accurate prognosis. They're just plausible description of how things may develop in the future based on a scenario logic, so on coherent and internally consistent assumptions about key relationships and driving forces. So they are a helpful tool for us to glimpse a little bit into different future pathways. So how could the Danube and Adriatic Ionian then macroregions develop by 2050? What would be possible future developments for them? That's what the ESPON TEVI 2050 project comes timely to look at and develop territorial scenarios for the two macroregions. So what do we do actually in this exciting project, I have to admit? Well, as Franziska said in the beginning, we develop and run a thorough co-creative process. That means we work together with key implementers of the two macro-regional strategies, applying territorial foresight. That's basically a combination of lateral thinking, participatory approaches, systems thinking, and elements of territorial impact assessment to develop baseline and alternative territorial scenarios for the Danube and the Adriatic Ionian macroregions. So we do not only look at different trends and how they interact, but also their effect on the different territories to develop these territorial scenarios. Moving to the next slide, we can see our starting point. Clicking one more, please. We can see here our starting point, which was actually the collection of different key development trends. So we made first a thorough trend collection coming from desk research and our co-creation process. And then we looked into how do these trends may develop, what is their impact, which will still be relevant by 2050, which may fade away. And in the slide, you can see this trend selection covering different big thematics, be that environment, governance, economy, technology, and societal change. So here we touched upon different many trends ranging from pollution, biodiversity loss, increased digitalization, increased importance of well-being, increasing inequalities, influence of global powers in the regions, just to name a few from the figure that we actually took as a starting point for our work for the development of our assumptions with the contribution of the co-creation process we had in the project. And of course, this does not mean that they all act single-handedly and by themselves. If we click one more, we can see that they're all linked and interconnected to each other one way or another, so they influence each other. And we took these trends as a next step through that process that we run together with the stakeholders to see how their paths will develop. And the next question that we asked there was, how will they influence the different territories? So here, this question has been the guiding question for developing our first baseline scenarios. That means showing how the future may develop if nothing changes, so giving some first indications on how these different futures may develop. So if we move to the next slide, we can see a little bit a possible baseline future for the Danube macroregion by 2050. So here, first thing to consider, for the baseline scenarios, we used similar assumptions given that the two macroregions share some territories, or some territories belong to both, or are part of both. And first thing to consider here is that population will decrease by 2050 in both macroregions. And that shows basically that aging and out-migration tendencies continue by 2050, indicating that there may be an uneven provision of services of general interest, which you can see these are higher. There's a higher provision, for example, in the western part of the macroregion, as you can see in the map, compared to the east. Another important element here for the baseline has been also the transition of the territories towards more sustainable economies, and that varies largely in the two. In addition, biodiversity loss, pollution, fossil fuel dependency, all these still remain challenging for both macroregions. Here, since we have the Danube macroregion map, we see, for example, coastal regions such as in the Bulgarian and Croatian coast. We see that they are quite challenging, as well as some parts in South Austria. And lastly, we also see by 2050 digital divide persists and differs across the region. So together with any lack of skilled laborers that may slow down the adoption of new technologies and new technological advancements. And that's also a little bit of an uneven change with implications in the different industrial profiles of the region. So in the Danube, for instance, we see that there may be some regions who may be struggling a little bit more with adapting and being dependent on old industries. And this will show that they're a little bit more challenged, as you can see now in the map with different parts of Germany, for instance, or Czech Republic. Moving to the Adriatic Ionian macroregion in the next slide, and following the same assumptions, so starting a little bit with the challenges of aging and out-migration. Here we see again an uneven provision of services of general interest, with again the West having a higher provision, with the East having bits and pieces with high provision, and the rest a little bit lower. We also see the transition to sustainable economies also being a challenge here, with again highlighting that natural areas basically are challenged by biodiversity loss and the need for clean energy space. And that does not only affect, of course, agriculture, but also other economic activities that are important for the region, like tourism, for instance. And here we see, for example, islands, coastal areas, lakes in the Adriatic Ionian macroregion that are vulnerable to these challenges. And when it comes to the digital divide, we can see here that on the other side, that, for example, early adopters on technology can actually leapfrog on different technological advancements and breakthroughs and make a bigger step by 2050. And that would be, for instance, as shown here in the map, parts of Italy or Greece or Slovenia that actually can leapfrog and make a bigger change in the future. These are actually only glimpses to that future that show you basically a sneak peek of the baseline scenarios that we have developed. So these are just some first information, and soon you will be able to read more details of the baseline scenarios in the next reports. In any case, question is actually this the only futures that we can think of? And what if we actually dared going a step further and imagine more extreme futures and going a little bit more to the extreme and think of the alternatives? So for both macroregions, we saw actually that different elements are important. If you click one more, please, we can see a first scenario cross that we developed that shows the scenario logic that we followed for our alternative scenarios. And here we can see that, for example, governance and EU integration have been very important elements for both macro regions. So how could governance develop in the future? Will it be closer to a meta-governance with high multi-level governance in the state, or the EU being more as a safeguard, let's say umbrella institution, or rather to the very other extreme, talking about the end of governance, where we see more fragmentation? At the same time, how would EU integration develop? Are we, let's say, in for more EU integration, or we go to the extreme opposite of, again, more fragmentation and breaking EU into pieces? If we click one more, we can see a scenario logic for the Danube. And here questions that were of high importance for the macro region were very much linked to digitalization and the future of digitalization. So could we imagine, for example, the Danube macro region as a hyper-networked society, going fully digitalized? How would that evolve in the future? Could we think of the exact opposite? At the same time, how would society develop, for instance? Do we see a more, again, networked society where people group into my interest, my tribe, so to say, small networks, or is it more individual, free, mesh net society where people just group along their interests? And clicking one more on the slide, we can see the Adriatic Ionian scenario logic, again, talking about different extremes and how these could develop. So here, for instance, we see the extremes of the future of environment, talking about a possible symbiosis of humans and nature in the future, so coexistence, or talking about the extreme opposite of having the Anthropocene, where basically human activities here are tremendous, and we see the consequences of that. And the other element of the extremes would be talking about human development. So how will society develop? How human development will evolve in the future? Will people stay in the regions, work there, or rather move out and rumble on across Europe or even globally? So all these extreme trends and extreme versions of them are a starting point for the alternative scenarios. And you can click one more to say that we're still in the process of that. And we also look at how different territories will actually be impacted by those drivers and how could society react. Of course, the answer is somewhere in the middle of all these crosses, so in different quadrants of these crosses, and it's not the very extreme, so that the scenarios in the end sound more like a science fiction story, but also not something that is expected or something we know. So they go the baseline scenarios a little bit further and a little bit more to the extreme. And of course, in these we look, as I said, both at the territorial implications as well as into other elements, so how society can interact, what technology will look like, environment, etc. So a disclaimer here is that we take these are starting points and then also reflect on other topics. This does not mean, of course, that we neglect other topics, but also touch upon them in the alternative scenarios. And these are all questions that we will answer in the currently under development territorial scenarios for the project that again take these extreme versions a little bit further. And to conclude with the next slide, I would like to end my presentation with a picture of an installation that I came across recently, just to highlight that scenarios are one powerful tool to imagine different possible futures. And sometimes when we think about the future, our attitude is more like the future being a nobody's time, where we actually have no responsibility for it and it's not up to us. And this very often results in short-sighted political decisions, and that's what we want to avoid, because even today, this present moment, actually sometime before it used to be this unimaginable future. So scenarios are actually key to inform policymakers to develop sound policies for the future so that we can actually build back better for the future generations and have more choices for that. If we click on more, then I would like to thank you for any questions. Always available. Thank you very much. Franziska, back to you.
Well, thank you, Maria. I think it's become very clear throughout the presentation that starting to think about the future and suddenly having the diversity of topics and developments that the future depends on, and where we might to think what the different futures in those topics are, is quite a challenging task. And thank you for taking us on this journey and maybe going sometimes the extra step to think really about some extremes may really help to come to an understanding of what the different positions and options are. So at this stage, we would first like to already open the floor to the public and just give you the opportunity to ask some questions before we have another round of comments by the panel. So you both, you can unmute yourself and or raise your hand and let me take you on stage, or you can also write a question in the chat and I'll be taking it there. So do we have already directly someone who would like to ask a question? I'm giving this a couple of seconds. Oh, there's Stefano. Great. You can unmute yourself and speak.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, thank you so much. I would like just to make some comments about the question of the lack of alternatives of the Adriatic Ionian macro region, since this is the region where I have been involved in many activities in the past and even currently. And actually, well, we can say that there are very unpredictable future for the region, but we have also to consider that the region is extremely differentiated in itself, not only because there is a difference between the eastern coast of Italy and the rest of the Southeast Europe. We can include partially Slovenia and some areas of Croatia as well, but all the other areas are areas that do not belong to the European Union, and the negotiations are very, very slow for the possibility of including these countries. So particularly I'm speaking, of course, about Bosnia, Serbia, Montenegro, well, Kosovo and North Macedonia. So it's extremely important that the macro-regional strategy plays a key role as a bridge for the future of the integration of this area, which means, by the way, that even the governance, the local governance, should be addressed in a different way by considering the need of establishing equal responsibilities and I would say equal competencies of the administration. I mean, in particular, if you consider the Italian regions or the districts or the Giuppanie or the cantons, there are so big differences, and it's extremely difficult for the administrations, local administrations, and to interact in a very systematic way. So one thing is to consider the role of the administration. Two, there are three fora in the macro regions that are working: the forum of the university, of the cities, and the Chamber of Commerce. All these three fora should be actively involved in the strategy of the enlargement, because they can at least make the situation more reliable for the political sphere to negotiate the future of the integration of this area. Well, we have to consider that this is the poorest area of Europe and needs a particular effort in terms of money, of investments, and of strategies. The alternative exists, regretfully, and we can be very careful if the European Union is withdrawing its own, let's say, commitment of Thessaloniki of 2003 by postponing to an endless future the integration of this area. This would have a great impact really in the even in the process of this further integration of the region. So I think that the macro regions can offer, and particularly in this case the Adriatic Ionian macro region can offer a great opportunity for the European Union to strengthen the integration from this point of view, and should be in some way exploited in brackets with all its own players that are already acting into the region to facilitate, let's say, the job of politics to make integration a perspective that cannot be challenged. This is the question. Regretfully, it's still under a challenge, so it's very important the actions that the macro region can play in this context. And in this case, just to conclude, I would encourage ESPON as such to develop research and actions with the macro region, with the ACEA. Just to give you a little example, yesterday we had a meeting. No, but it's a question, a very important aspect. The macro regions are unknown in the Adriatic Ionian region. We made a survey as universities among the students and professors. 87% of people didn't know about the macro region. I think this is a field where we should work, and ESPON can do a lot in this sense. Sorry for I was too long, but this is an issue that involved me emotionally a lot. Sorry.
No, it's very good to see that there are many stakeholders passionate about a region, and this is what this project tries to do, is to get into a conversation, and unfortunately we're just a little bit tight in time with the project. And I would like to give Maria, there were a lot of important points, and I would like to just quickly, before we move on, Maria or one of the stakeholders, the opportunity to react. We've got about 2-3 minutes there. Maria, do you want to directly comment or react, or maybe someone from the two stakeholders, Lenča or Mathilde?
Well, if I have to say a few words, I will say that maybe Mathilde has a clearer picture on that, but my perception is that EUSDR anyway works towards that direction, in being the bridge in the region, in bringing all these different players together, all these different members of the strategy together. So I think already there are steps towards that a stronger integration towards that direction that was mentioned.
Yes, and I think also what we can see across all macro regions of Europe, the longer they exist, the more they actually become known to the public. So I think there is some important steps. I think this already also links very well to the next round of panel questions that I've got. And this is really how to engage now with those territorial scenarios and how to make use of this type of thinking. So my question to you is, how do you envisage to make use of these territorial scenarios in your work? And maybe to even go a step further, how can those territorial scenarios contribute really to the implementation of the macro-regional strategy at different geographical levels? Also, this was raised in the comment by Stefano, that it's really important to make sure that there are different levels of governance involved in different priority areas. And I think I would like to now start with Robert. So we are going to the Danube region first.
Thank you, Franziska. I would also, in my answer, pick up what Stefano was saying here. Although he wasn't referring to the Danube region, but the situation is very similar there, and this is something that we know also from other macro-regional strategies. And if you look at the Danube, we are basically facing a very similar situation there, having this diversity of regions cooperating together. If you look at the Danube and look to the west, we have one of wealthiest regions there. And if you look to the Far East, then we have regions of Ukraine and Moldova here, and the cooperation is basically the key to overcome the problems that we all face for the future. So, and this is nothing new that I'm telling you. The problems and the challenges that we face, they don't know the borders, so they don't stop at a German border or an Hungarian border. So only by joining forces we can actually get some results. And something which also you referred to, Franziska, was this and Maria, of course, was this interconnection of the stakeholders, and this is the way that macro-regional strategies work, where you have also the multi-level governance. So we need to involve all stakeholders, be it on the national or the regional level. So basically the decision makers of the strategies who represent the national positions and the national and regional stakeholders. But we also need the what we call the so-called thematic coordinators. So those experts who actually deal with the topics on the ground. So this is the experts from all, in the case of Danube, 14 from all 12 priority areas that we deal with. So unless this interconnection and this interdependency of all the stakeholders works, we are not going to reach the aims that we have all put in our action plans. And referring to where the ESPON, the TEVI 2050 study can be taken up, if I think about the Danube region, we have in the action plan, and we heard that in the EUSDR you are also thinking about revising the action plan. We have in our process, which started 2019, have revised the action plan after 10 years of implementation, and this would probably not work at this time, because the challenges that we face are coming much quicker and much faster now. So the change is much quicker. If we just think about the COVID situation, so many things changed in the last 1.5 years. If we look at the question of digital transformation, digitalization, now we have the Green Deal. So this is something that just came up in the last 2-3 years, and I think the TEVI study can also provide the decision makers on the national and regional level room for acting, not room for reacting, short-term reactions, but we need to have a common vision. So also the political level, and this is something which is very important for all macro-regional strategies, is the political backing here. So once we provide as the implementers of the strategy for the political level clear visions and something that you can rely to for a longer period of time. And I think this is why the study is really great, to have the baseline scenarios, but also to look at how the extreme can look like if we do nothing, or if we fail to do what we are supposed to do, how the future could look like. And I think this combination of baseline scenarios and these extreme scenarios can be used, or should be used, on the national and the regional level, so the decision makers in the strategy, but the same way for the thematic coordinators, so those who deal with sustainable development, those who take care of knowledge society, stimulating economy, fighting poverty, enhancing democracy. So all the topics that we are dealing on a macro-regional stage here. So again, where it can be used, I think in all strategies, and in Danube for sure, this will be a great source of information for the future, how to change, how to adapt, how to look at what topics we should focus more in the future, and again think about the issues that we deal with are not issues that have just a small part, that they are very cross-cutting. And if we want to change, if we speak about digital transformation, we cannot just think about technology here. This has to do with the society, with the economy. So all other parts are also concerned. So a clear cooperation across all macro-regional levels, across all the governance levels. And yeah, this would be my input for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Mathilde, do you want to go next?
Yes, thank you. Well, I would like to start by commenting on what Stefano mentioned, and I would like to say that exactly all the issues that he put on the table represent the charm and the challenges of our Adriatic Ionian strategy. And we do not let's say, neglect the role of administration and the role of the different levels of governance. We consider them very important in preparing, planning, but also implementing the strategy. Nevertheless, we have to stress out that it is an issue also of prioritization. I mean, Stefano mentioned that 85% following the survey they conducted do not know about this macro-regional strategy. Okay. Let's do a similar survey within our own ministry. I will tell you then that this percentage will be even higher. And this is, I'm saying it with regret. So, I mean, it's also a prioritization of the macro-regional strategies at different levels of governance within the national level in order to move forward and obtain the results that we want to obtain. Now, moving to your question, Franziska. As we mentioned before, Maria also put it out very vividly in her presentation. What prevails is uncertainty and unpredictability. So these territorial scenarios, what they can do is to help decision makers make better choices and choose the optimal strategy that will lead to the reduction of regional disparities. Choose the optimal strategy, not in the context of a macro-regional strategy, but in the context of policy making. So all this process, all the use of the scenarios is to enrich the policy processes with long-term developments and render the chosen strategies at every level of governance more relevant, efficient, and effective. Going to our strategy now, to the EUSDR strategy, what we are trying to obtain, what we would like to do, who we are going to help. Well, first of all, we have the scenarios that will help the implementers of the strategy. All structures, all governance structures of our strategy will be helped by the scenarios, but also the actors that are involved in project development and project preparation. Both strategies have different characteristics, and their scenarios are based on different variables. Nevertheless, policy priorities are more or less the same, and some of them are set out by the European Commission for 21-27. Also, relevant strategic projects focus on hot issues of the current time: healthcare, the pandemic, environment, environmental protection, digital transformation. So all these, to be further elaborated, developed, and better implemented, need capacity building. And this capacity building can be helped by scenarios. And apart from that, all stakeholders need to enhance their administrative and their operational support in order to comply with these demands at the different levels of the preparation of the strategy. So the strategy is linked to the selection of projects, but also to the programs linked to the strategies. All these, let's say, represent a triangle that has to be on equal basis built in order to obtain the results. And the results will be the added value of the strategy. And when we obtain that, then I can assure Stefano there will be many, many more people discussing about our macro-regional strategy and being dedicated to it as we are. Thank you very much.
Thank you for already putting us in this very positive mindset of what we are aiming to achieve over the next decade. And I can really see this come to be alive. And I think, Lenča, what do you suggest? Lenča, sorry, apologies. Lenča, what do you suggest? What's your views on how you envisage to make use of the territorial scenarios in your work? And how can this, contribute to the implementation of the macro-regional strategies? With Slovenia being actually the country that's in the unique position to be part of 3 macro-regions in Europe, I'm sure that in Slovenia, a lot of people are already aware of the macro-regions.
Thank you for these very interesting standpoints. There were so many already exposed that I don't really know where to start. Maybe with regional disparities. It's true. Even though we try to create sort of regions that on one or another point belong together, we can face many, many differences within regions, macro regions, but maybe this is one very strong reason why we should try to create common future, why it is so important to decide on common goals and then try to implement them. Macro regions are, of course, a very important bridge in the context of some European states being parts of the European Union and some not yet. Some are connected through other organizations or initiatives, but never mind, we, regardless to where we belong politically, need common decisions on future development. I would like to stress the importance of spatial planning activities in this sense. We all know that spatial planning is not part of the common European legislation, but on the other hand, very special and dedicated care should be paid to responsibility for better future, for responsibility for space which will enable quality of life. I was, as already said, part of the Alpine exercise, and maybe Alpine region, as compared to the Danubian or the Adriatic Ionian, is more, so to say, not as diverse as the other 2 macro regions, but still we needed some time, some ideas to create a common development scenarios. And I believe that this exercise in other 2 regions will be a bit more difficult, but the same importance is in front of us. I think that the scenarios we are creating are very sensible, because in scenarios we can expose different possible consequences of activities. I think it is the only right way to expose extreme possibilities and then be able to decide on optimal scenarios. I think that scenarios are a helpful tool for creation better decisions. And these decisions can then be base for projects, and the results of the projects and data collection activities are then a very good base for policymakers, strategies, and all other stakeholders on national, regional, and also local levels. I think that if we share the same space, we should also share the vision and the strategy for our future development. I think that all that I have already said is especially important in Danubian and Adriatic Ionian macroregions, where, in my opinion, waters are the most important and a very strong connecting element. And regardless to where a certain state is located, downstream or upstream, it is of crucial importance that we develop or consider this space as a whole, so that we cooperate in creating better future strategies. I think that scenario exercise is a very useful follow-up to macro-regional strategies, which sometimes might be too general. So the scenarios give more shape and more content to the macro-regional strategies, and I think they will help to improve and also implement the strategies. I also think that according to different challenges, pandemics and all the others already mentioned, it is important to revise the programs. I think at least every, 5-10 years, or whenever new challenges come into question, it should be necessary to revise also the programs. I will not go into detail into one certain challenge. I would also like only to mention, or maybe to conclude with one thought which I find very important. As far as I know from the Alpine and also from the Adriatic Ionian macro-region, I'm not so sure for Danubian, all the activities are carried out, or most of activities are carried out through the pillars or AG groups. I find the work of certain pillars or AG groups maybe a bit too less connected. So more cooperation among the pillars or the action group would be needed for better implementation of the strategies. And I also think what was mentioned by Stefano at the beginning of this second round, that maybe all these strategies lack publicity. So maybe we should find more ways to bring them closer to public, and maybe this will also help them to the implementation process. This would be that for that round. Thank you, and giving the word back.
Thank you, Lenča. So there were lots of different points stemming from or around the political battle, the multi-level governance, the different prioritizations in macro regions, and the aspects of the uncertainties of development that prevail. So I'm not capturing all of them, but also the key topics were mentioned, and the increasing speed with which European regions, and specifically those two regions, are experiencing change. Let health be one of the topics, digitalization, others. And then what was mentioned as well is that say that strategies should be thinking about acting, and that actually those scenarios can really help to start acting rather than being reactive to developments, but actively thinking about what the type of futures is that we are. And I think what came across very clearly, and I think this is a task that you've almost posed to yourself, but also to others in the macro regions, to collaborate across the different macro regions. And as such, I think this specific project is trying to think those different regions together, facing the same constraints while still being territorially and nationally different, is quite important. So for the remainder of this session, we've got about 15 minutes left. I would like to first give Maria the opportunity to respond to many of those comments, and then I would like to open up to the public again. So you're already very much welcome to raise your hands or already type your questions in the chat. Maria, over to you.
Thanks, Franziska. I think we heard very interesting inputs from both the public and the speakers. I think these are all challenges that macro-regional strategies face, but also the power they have to address them through cooperation. Of course, that's a process. It's something that takes time. I mean, cooperation is not easy, we have seen, but it pays off. And I think that's like viable to see in the future. And when it comes to the scenario work, it's actually seeing different options we have for the future, things that may come or may don't come, but at least we can be a little bit more prepared and design, let's say, our own next steps rather than face things that we didn't want to. And that's what, for example, this project offers here. And it's also a stepping stone, so to say, for thinking even further in the future. I remember when we worked on the Baltic Sea territorial scenarios back in the day, another ESPON project that was led by Nordregio. Now we work on developing a vision for FASAP, so thinking even more further towards the desirable future we want to do. So thinking about the future today needs to be more a common practice than something that we're not used to do. Needs to be even more to the forefront.
Thank you. So now I would like to reach out to everyone behind the screens somewhere in Europe. Does anyone have a question or would like to comment or give additional suggestions? I don't see something coming up immediate, so I'm going to use the opportunity to ask one more question that has been coming up across all three statements, which seems to be that there is some need to make the macro-regional cooperation more visible and more accessible to the public. And I know this has been discussed since years now, how to reach out and whether, isn't it that we should primarily first address the own policymakers and, make macro-regions more known within, I'd say, the own ministries and so on. But as you've all mentioned this, it seems to be on the radar. How would you think that this territorial scenarios would help you to engage with the public? Maybe Robert, do you have an idea or a comment, something from the top of your head?
Thanks, Franziska. And this is it's really interesting because in several other meetings throughout the past one and a half months, it always lands in the question of communication somehow. I don't know if this is just a coincidence. It seems that this is something that we really need to think about, how to communicate the work that we do. And in the Danube, within the Danube strategy point, we have been working on this for several years now. As you may know, we also have something which is some kind of a slogan for the strategy: prosperity through diversity. So trying to break down the very, very complicated world of macro-regional work and the very simple questions: how do we sell the strategy? How do we communicate the outcomes from the work to the people of the region? And the discussion goes that the people from the region are not interested in the national coordinators and priority area coordinators and meetings that we do and scenarios that we prepare. The people of the region want to have a good, sustainable life. So I think this is the mission that we basically all follow. The question there is, what strategies do we use to communicate the outcomes, to see that the people on the ground have something out of the joint work that we do? And it's not an easy task. And we had in the Danube region strategy, we had several communication measures here. On one hand, communicating the strategy, as we already heard, within the ministries, within the national and regional administrations. So on one hand, to make public and to make it more known within the professional world, let's call it this way. And on the other hand, to pick the outcomes that we have, so be it the projects, really the projects on the ground, and then communicate it to the public and say, look, this project, this bridge, or this project, this is something that a macro-regional strategy brought to you. So it's a difficult go here, and I think there is not just one strategy how to follow this. You need a multiple strategies according to the target groups that you aim. But for all of you who are interested, we have been working in the Danube on this for, I think, over 2 years. So happy also to share our experience with you here.
Thank you. I don't see any hands raised or any questions from the public. If there is something, no. Otherwise, I will use the opportunity to address one more question to Maria, and this is relating to the.
Sorry, Franziska, can I add something to what Robert very eloquently said? Yeah, thank you. Because, well, Lenča a bit provoked us when she mentioned something about publicity of the strategy. And Robert also speaks of the Danube strategy, which is mature. So we are the youngest child in the macro-regional strategy family. And our main problem is when we want to reach out to stakeholders, to project developers, to implementers, to different levels of governance. And the main problem is money and funds, because the strategy on itself has no funds. And this is something that it is very difficult to be understood by implementers, by people that are at different levels of governance, and they are asked to step in and design projects, implement projects, follow up projects. And so, of course, we will do our best to make the strategy visible. We've done many steps towards that direction. The EUSDR strategy has also the stakeholders platform where ideas, proposals, actors, stakeholders can meet their fora, can meet there and discuss, exchange views, discuss their ideas. But as long as we have no money for the strategy, and I'm putting it very bluntly and very to the point. And as long as we have this mentality that unless we have money, we can't do anything, or we cannot promote what we are designing, we will have to make short steps and very careful steps. And that's why capacity building is important, but also changing the mentality and training the implementers of our strategy, how and what we have to do to further make the strategy visible and popular. Thank you.
Thank you. So this brings us already in view also of the final round, or the final statements that I would like to give to the public from your side. So would you be willing to suggest like a final, almost Twitter-like statement, summary of the session? So what's your key takeaway message? And I would suggest that we first go to the studio now. Lenča, what's your takeaway?
My takeaway from this workshop, and also from all the discussion heard today, is that it's worth working on scenarios, because I think that we all pointed out that scenarios, or the optimal scenario and the vision taken out of it, is the right way from the macro-regional strategy, which is rather general, to implementation of better solutions in space. This would be my takeaway. Besides, how to make the macro regions and the goals and the scenarios visible, or more visible, take people aboard. I would suggest this already within the TEVI 2050 project and in all other activities which mean the implementation of the strategy. I think this is the right procedure to become vivid and to produce and implement better results. Thank you.
Thank you. Maria, you're up next. What's your key takeaway?
I would say more as a food for thought that territorial scenarios are powerful to inform policymakers that actually want to ask what if instead of what now.
Thank you. Robert, what's your takeaway?
Maria, this was really short. I was thinking about a tweet.
A short tweet.
Mine would be a really long one, so I will not be that short as you are, but I'm trying. I think and I think this is the essence of the TEVI 2050, and this is what I find so. Let me put it maybe in a blunt way, really cool, that we are getting provided an alternative futures for the regions, and I think this is something really cool that we can work with, and it's completely up to us. It's up to the macro-regional strategies what we make out of this alternative futures. So if we apply cooperation and coordination within our regions, we can only produce good results. I know it's a long tweet, sorry.
Thank you very much. And for the last time today, we would like to travel to Greece.
Okay, thank you. Well, I will be a bit provocative, and I'm going to give you a formal tweet and a more visible and public interesting tweet. So the formal tweet on scenarios will be that territorial scenarios add value to both macro-regions through the creation of in-depth knowledge that expands the policy-making horizon, provides critical input to better informed decision-making, increasing the relevance, the efficiency, the effectiveness, and the impact of the macro regions. And now to the more, trendy one, dedicated to our beloved EUSDR strategy. And starting from the point where Maria's presentation ended when she referred to the EUSDR strategy. So we live by the day, creating every day something new in EUSDR structure, planning for the future, designing our strategy, adapting to unpredictable circumstances, willing to welcome newcomers, leading the way for the preparation of other strategies, expanding our vision, promoting our mission. Thank you very much.
That's a perfect stop to the session. I'm almost unwilling to continue moderating.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So now I would like to give back to the studio for the close of the session and to give Victor the final say, but not without having to say thank you very much to the organizers in Bled for making this possible in a very smooth way. And I have to admit, I'm quite impressed, even though we are not able to be physically in Bled, we already are able in your background to see this wonderful lake, which at least was giving us some idea of the beauty of Bled today on our screens. Victor, the final words are yours.
Franziska, thank you very much indeed. Actually, it's a pity you can't be here in Bled because just next door we have the real lake, not the image of the lake in the background. I'm very thankful to all of you for this session. I've been part of the EU Baltic Sea strategy for many years also in this initiation phase. So I do remember the pains and gains of being involved in different priority areas. I know this is not an easy job, and apart from communication, coordination and cooperation, there is also this important aspect of communication that we know actually has no money to put on in order to be really visible to the every single person in residing or working in the macro region. So even more, this is important that you perform your job with the commitment that you have shown through the years to come. So I'm very happy again that we've been able to exchange on this very interesting subject of the macro-regional futures and what kind of territories we are going to see developed in, say, roughly 20 years to come or 30 years to come. So cordial thanks to all of you that's been engaged in the preparation of this workshop and its proper execution, and also very big thanks to the tech team that made it possible for us to actually be web streamed online. So without further ado, we are wrapping up this session. Thanks a lot, Lenča, as well, for being here with me. To you, Franziska, very perfect moderation that I appreciated a lot. And dear colleagues, good luck to all of you with your very important mission, because if you're going to give up on this job, who else is going to keep the drive for the macro-regional strategies? So let the force be with you, and all the best. Thank you very much.